Hello, my darling. I am sharing with you the books that I have read in the first quarter of the year. Spoiler alert, the list is not very long, but that's okay. So the first book that I read is Where All Light Tends to Go by David Joy. This was a thriller / suspense novel, and it was about this young man named Jacob. I can't remember his last name. McCarthy, McGuire. I can't even remember his name. Jacob McNeely. This was a story about Jacob McNeely, who is a young man living in Cashiers, North Carolina, and his father runs like this really big meth ring, and he's got like all of these police in his pocket, and he's just a really horrible guy. And over the years, Jacob's father has said to him, like, drop out of school, McNeelys don't finish high school, work for me, and for all of the work that you do, I'm setting aside money for you, and at some point when you turn 18, I'm going to give you this money and you can go and do whatever you want with yourself. And so Jacob is going along with this and just sort of waiting for this money. And in the meantime, he doesn't feel that he is a person who is very deserving or worthy of anything, and in particular, not the love of his life, Maggie, who Jacob has known since he was a kid, and they actually dated in high school, but Jacob broke up with Maggie because he just felt like she was going places, she was going to college, and he didn't want to ruin her life. And so he's in this book just waiting to get this money, or in this book he's already in this place where he's just given up hope and just assumed that someday he's going to get this money that his dad has for him, and he'll be able to like eke out some living, but he doesn't think that he will ever be able to be with Maggie. And so the moment that he sort of has some hope of reconnecting with Maggie, all hell breaks loose. And now Jacob is trying to not only protect Maggie from the lifestyle that he lives, but also managed to come out alive and, on top himself. I really enjoyed this book. It was my first time reading anything from this author, and I definitely plan to read some of his other books. I know that he writes nonfiction and fiction, so I definitely want to read some of his Joy's fictional works. I loved his language, the way he described this area, this very woodsy area, the way that he described the town and the people in that town was just really fun to read. He made my heart bleed for Jacob. I felt like I wanted to be Jacob's mom. Jacob's mom is actually a meth addict, and the father was like horrible to her, and so that was really heartbreaking too, to see that the father, he just assumed Jacob wouldn't want anything to do with her, like she was just like a piece of rubbish. But Jacob still had this like secret relationship with his mom, and so it was endearing to see how he tried to maintain connection with his mom, but it was also heartbreaking to see that she was just like not there. There was, she couldn't really have a relationship with him. And so you just spend the novel just like really rooting for Jacob. I mean, Jacob is working in a meth ring. Jacob is helping his father to like enforce their rules with violence. And yet I still found myself rooting for Jacob. And like I said, feeling like a mother figure to him. If the story, like if I were to pick a theme or a line that described this story, it would be from Little Fires Everywhere. I didn't read the book, but I saw the series, and there's that scene where Kerry Washington's character tells Reese Witherspoon's character, you didn't make good choices, you had good choices, with her lips and everything. And so to me, that's like the theme of this book. Like Jacob just has some pretty shitty choices, and yes, he's 17 now, but he had a lifetime of being raised by someone who runs a meth ring and who is just, if there's a such thing as a nice drug dealer, his father was not it. And so he just has some really crappy choices, and unfortunately Jacob wasn't too swift. Not too swift. And so even with the crappy choices that he had, I could see him going deeper and deeper into like even worse situations, and there was nothing I could do. Jacob could not hear me screaming into the book, but it was a very good book and I definitely recommend it. The next book that I read after Where All Light Tends to Go, see if I can remember. It was the Rib King by Lady Hubbard. And I actually did a separate book talk video on that book where I go into detail about the book and my thoughts about it, and the fact that it is actually a prequel, and that now I want to read the first book, which is the Talented Ribkins. So if you're interested in that book, check out that video. The next book that I read was The Burning Girls by C.J. Tudor. It's suspenseful. If you didn't see the most anticipated reads video, it's basically about a priest, a reverend, who gets assigned to this church, and when they arrive, like, their welcoming gift is an exorcism kit, and there are some freaky, creepy secrets in this town based in some historic legend that's associated with the town. With one major exception, The Burning Girls did not disappoint. Now, I'm not going to get into that book talk here. I actually have a separate video that I'm doing for that, so look out for it. One of the things that I most appreciated about the book, one, there were multiple POVs, which I don't usually like, but I like them in this book. There were one of the POVs was a character that you didn't even know who they were until like maybe 3/4 in, and I still enjoyed it. You ever read a book and there are multiple POVs and like you get sad when you get to one of them, or you just don't like them all equally? Well, I enjoyed all of the POV characters, and then what was I gonna say? The chapters were like so short and sweet. I don't think I've ever read a book with such short chapters, and enjoyed it. But you see what's happening? I said I was not going to go into it until this other video, so I'm going to leave it there and just say I enjoyed the book, again with one exception. I can't forget this exception because it's a big one. So then the next book I read, what is that? It was 1, 2, that was 3. Fourth book that I read was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyin Khan Braithwaite. That's a book that I started reading last year actually, and really wanted to finish it, so I finally got my hands on that book and finished, and it was so good. I love a good black comedy. That's exactly what this book was, and it's about these two sisters, Korede and Ayula. Ayula is like the pretty one, and she has men breaking down barriers to get to her, and she can't beat them off with a stick, and she's literally beating them off with a stick because she keeps killing them. She kills her boyfriends, and then she calls her sister Korede like, girl, something happened, I need you to come here and help me dispose of this body. And so Korede goes to her sister's rescue and helps her to dispose of these men's bodies, and she assumes for a very long time that her sister is the victim. But as the story progresses, you learn that there's more to Ayula than we know. I mean, she's a murderer, but there's more to it. And that she's not innocent. You can tell from the beginning, but you don't know exactly what's happening. But then there's this other more serious layer to the story, which is really nice. So to have a story that's a dark comedy and then still have this more meaningful aspect to it. It wasn't just all diabolical fun. There was also this deeper meaning to the story. And so the catch is Ayula's killing her boyfriends, and Korede, of course, wants her to stop, but stuff gets real when Ayula has her eyes sets her eyes on a man that Korede really loves and likes. So that was a really good story. And My Sister the Serial Killer also had like the most delectably sweet short chapters. Never that I was really a short chapter person, but these two books, The Burning Girls and My Sister the Serial Killer, have shown me that it can be done very, very well. So that's it. You know, in all honesty, I did read more than 4 books this quarter, but the other books that I read were actually novellas because I'm working on a little bit of a project, and so I'm not going to get into those books because when I'm ready, I will discuss them. So for the purposes of this quarterly wrap up, I read 4 books, and I actually also have a confession because my hope, my goal was to read a lot more than 4 books this quarter. I've sort of been timing how many pages I can read in a certain amount of time comfortably, and so I definitely thought I might read like at minimum 4 books a month rather than 4 books in a quarter. And yes, I read other novellas like I said, but even with that, I mean, these novellas took like 2 to 3 hours to read. So I wasn't very happy with myself and the reading that I did over the quarter. But at some point in these last few months, I came across, well, okay, I've already heard of this term, mood reader, but I realized that's what I am. So that's my confession. I know that you've been waiting with bated breath to hear that, but I realized that I'm a mood reader. So if you don't know what a mood reader is, like, some people say a mood reader is someone who, like, when I'm in a crappy mood, I like to read this genre of books. Like if I'm in a crappy mood, I want to read alien romance. That is a thing. Or someone who says, you know, when I'm really feeling sick or something, I like to read adventure, women's adventure fiction. So that kind of thing, where when you're in a certain mood, you want to read a certain genre or subgenre of books. And then other people talk about mood readers like when there's a certain like season or time period they want to read certain things, which I would call that a seasonal reader. But so say someone during the summertime likes to read murder mysteries, or someone when it's wintertime only wants to read holiday themed books. That's, you know, one type of mood reader. The type of mood reader that I'm talking about is someone who will pick up a book and start reading it and actually be enjoying that book. So it's not a DNF situation, but someone is reading a book, enjoying it, puts it down, and then when they pick up a book to read again, they pick up another book. They don't feel like reading this book even though they've been enjoying it. And I realized that even though I've only completed reading, completed 4 books this quarter, I have read many other books, meaning parts of those books, of course, not all of them. And so it just, you know, as someone who wants to talk about books regularly, it's kind of a revelation for me. And I don't know why I didn't realize this sooner, but here we are. So I thought, well, it makes sense then when I do my quarterly wrap-ups that I would talk about what other books that I have read some of but not completed. And the hope is that soon I'll finish these books. So let's see. Right now I'm looking on my Libby app through the library because that gives me a good sense of like what books what ebooks I've borrowed from the library. Okay, so I'm going to list the books that I have read at least in part during this quarter. One is Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby. And I won't really go into what the books are about, or maybe I should. So Blacktop Wasteland is about this man, I don't remember his name, the character's name, but he races cars. And so he's been out of this life of car racing for a long time. And then something happens where he needs some money, I believe, for his family. And he gets back into it, and it just kind of throws his world, I love the word tailspin, but throws his world into a tailspin. Okay, another book that I read part of is All the Ever Afters by Daniel Teller. That book I actually did DNF because, I was really excited about this idea. I don't think it's a retelling, but it had like the feel of like that old Cinderella, Snow White type atmosphere, but it just wasn't doing it for me. That's what it was about. It's a book about Cinderella's stepmother, and that this idea that her stepmother is not the evil woman that we believe she is because of the Cinderella fairy tale. I put it down and decided not to pick it back up again. Blindsided by Karen Slaughter. I don't exactly remember what that book was about, but it's crime fiction. The Witch's Daughter by Paula Braxton. Again, that book and I were not vibrationally matched, so I DNF'd it. But I love the cover of that book. It was really eerie. It was a story about a woman who made a deal with a man who was some kind of warlock, and so she doesn't ever die, and like hundreds of years later he finds her and comes to collect this debt that she owes him for making her immortal in the first place. When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. Nana by Brandon Massey, which is a story about this woman whose grandmother dies, and then she never knew her own mom, and then all of a sudden this old woman like shows up and wants to like spend time with her and her family. It's a horror book, and it actually was pretty eerie, so I think I'll go back and look at that book, read that book again. Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. I started reading that book. It's about an enslaved woman who is promised that when her master dies, or her enslaver dies, that she will be freed. But his sister does not like her, and so when he dies, the sister sells this enslaved woman to like the worst plantation as like, I wouldn't say punishment, because punishment sort of suggests that someone did something wrong in the first place. But the sister sends her to this like horrible plantation where she has to try and survive. And with everything going on, honestly, I started the book. It's a great writing, enjoyed the book, but I just had that sense that this book, like even in the first couple chapters, I'm like, this book is already taking me places that I just don't need to go right now. So I put that down for the time being. Finley Donovan is Killing It by El Casimano. That was one of the books on my most anticipated reads list, and I'm not going to use the H word, but I very much dislike Finley Donovan. In the first chapter of this book, first of all, I wanted to like this woman. I wanted to root for her. I was rooting for Jacob, the meth dealer, right? I would rather root for Jacob than root for Finley Donovan. That says a lot. In the first chapter of her book, Finley is running late for a meeting with her book agent. Her daughter has scissors and she's cutting her own hair. She slices her head with the scissors and she's got blood dripping down her head. This is what the page is saying. The narrator is telling me. Her son, Finley's son, is sitting in his high chair eating waffles, and Finley has given this little boy so much syrup. He has it in his hair. He's got it all over the high seat. He's got it in his hands so that when he pulls his hands apart, the syrup is just, gone. You know what I mean? He's got it on Finley. She's got things sticking to her. Her daughter's hair is sticking to her clothes, to her wrists, because she's got the syrup on her. And Finley's just acting like the only thing that matters is that she's running late. Finley, your baby's head is bleeding. And then she finds out that her ex-husband fired her nanny and didn't tell her. And that's why she's running late to this meeting, because she's been waiting for the nanny. So she finds out that he fired the nanny, and so she's going to take the kids to his house so that he can keep them while she has this meeting. And when she realizes that the little boy has pooped in his pamper, She decides to leave the little boy sitting in his own poop so that she can piss off the ex-husband because he's going to get a baby that's messy. But like I said, I am going to finish reading it. But I think that's a good enough list. And one other thing I wanted to talk about, just since, you know, we're on the topic of mood readers, is that because I looked this up, I was trying to diagnose myself. And, you know, one of the things I saw is that mood readers tend to have really long TBR lists. So there was a time when I would say, I'm going to read these books this month, or I'm going to read these books this week. I don't do that anymore because it just has never really worked for me. But I do have this like ever-growing, never-ending list of books that I want to read. When I open up Goodreads, I have 91 books that I want to read on Goodreads. I don't know if you include books on your shelf as your TBR. I assume if you bought the books or you own the books that you intend to be reading them. Maybe I will open up my Libib because that's where I'll know how many books I have. This is very cathartic. I'm glad that I'm opening up and sharing this with you. I've been holding on to this burden, carrying this burden on my own for so long, and now you can carry part of it with me and for me. So my personal library of physical books is 139. I don't know how many. Do I have any to be? Oh, I have 30 books here that I want to read. So the 30 here, 32, along with the 91 on Goodreads. What is that? 123. Again, I'm sure that I have hundreds of books on book lists on the Amazon website, because I have like a main one, and then I have ones that I started that were like genre, you know, separated by genre. But I'm going to look at what was I going to look at? Oh, I was going to try and see how many books I have on my Kindle, because again, I think that is, you know, kind of TBR-ish. I have 756 books on my Kindle. Yeah, 756 books. No shame here. First step is acknowledging that you love books, that you love to buy books, and that's what I'm doing. I'm acknowledging that I love to buy books, I love to borrow books, I love to put books on lists. And you know, I will say that in this first quarter, I was putting a lot of books that were on my anticipated reads list, like in, you know, I was putting them on hold through the library to get the ebooks, and they just all come up all at the same time. The library does have a way where, like, if you put an ebook on hold and it becomes available and you're not ready to read it yet, you can, like, you know, put it back into rotation and wait until, you know, they'll bring it back to you maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that. So I started doing that when I learned about it. But I would have like 8 books come to me at one time, and I'm like, I can do this. I'm going to read one book, and it takes me maybe two days to read a book. By the end of this week, I would have read 3 books, and I'll be on to the next ones. I can do this, and then it's like, now this book is due in 7 days, and now this book is due in 2 days, and then the book is just returned automatically. So it's been a pretty wild ride for me. I will end this video by sharing the 3 books that I am currently reading. I have The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. I also got the Blacktop Wasteland back, which again, I started reading that one before. And I have This Close to Okay with Lisa Cross Smith. So there we are. There it is. I would love to know in the comment section whether or not you are a mood reader, whether or not you can relate at all to the mood readiness that I have been experiencing and discovering about myself. And until next time.